Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Central Library. My name is Vaiva. I'm one of the staff here. As part of African Heritage Month, we would like to welcome you for a panel discussion on the creation of the play Chasing Champions, a depiction of the life and legacy of African Nova Scotian boxing legend Sam Langford. Before we start, I would like to remind everyone that this event is being live streamed and recorded. I would like to introduce Jeremy Webb, artistic producer of Eastern Front Theatre, to say a few words and introduce the moderator and the panelists.
Thank you. Thanks for having us here. On behalf of Eastern Front Theatre, we are thrilled later on in the year, in April, to be presenting Chasing Champions, and we're really happy that you guys have come out this evening to the library to see this event. I'm not going to say anything more because these guys are waiting to get into the conversation, so I'm going to hand straight away over to Juanita Peters, host and moderator for the evening, and enjoy.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. First of all, I'm going to say, coming here tonight was very much like Jeremy and I's trip to see Chasing Champions in Parsborough, and we were like really behind the gun and racing to get there on time. And I was so very delighted to see people out on the ship's deck in Parsborough having a drink, which meant, of course, that the show hadn't gone in yet, and we were not that late. So welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to see all these faces here tonight for what I think is going to be a very interesting conversation. The conversation, of course, about a fairly famous Canadian boxer by the name of Sam Langford, who some of you may or may not have heard of before tonight, but by the time the night is over, you will know a whole lot more about him. I'm going to introduce our guests tonight. First of all, we're going to start with Jacob Sampson, who grew up in the Annapolis Valley. He's a graduate of the Acadia University Theatre Studies program. He's had 4 seasons with Shakespeare by the Sea, playing such roles as Oberon, Theseus in A Midsummer's Night Dream, and he's also been in Much Ado About Nothing, Aaron in Titus Andronicus, and he also played Richard Preston in a play that I directed a few years ago called Settling Africville, and that was my first introduction to Jacob and his incredible talent. He's an artist. He was the first artist in residence at the Nova Scotia Maritime Museum in February of 2013, and he has most recently developed an elementary drama program, which he now teaches full-time at Bedford Academy, which is a private school. He began working on Chasing Champions 3 years ago and is excited and grateful to be part of the Eastern Front Theatre production, which is coming up in April 20th. Zach is a Halifax actor and theatre maker. Recent credits include is it Ippersip?
Yes.
Ippersip disappeared and Chasing Champions at Ship's Company Theatre, and Vanishing Woman, which was a very good play, at the Atlantic Fringe. He's very pleased to be part of this remount of Chasing Champions after the fabulous run this summer in Parsborough Theatre. For those of you who may not have been to Parsborough Theatre, it's well worth the drive. It really is. Just the scenery, the atmosphere, and the quality of production in Parsborough, you must go. And last but certainly not least, I have with me Mr. Ricky Anderson. For any of you who follow boxing or know anything about boxing, I'm so happy to have Ricky here with us tonight. It's been a while since I've seen him. He's actually a native of Africville, Canadian-born, and made the Olympic team in 1981?
1980.
1980. His professional career, 1985, when he was crowned the Canadian welterweight boxing champion. After his boxing career, he went on for 12 years. He completed his education at St. Mary's University and worked as a drug prevention officer or specialist in addiction services in Dartmouth for a long time. And he was heralded for, helping to raise the awareness about drugs in Nova Scotia and especially in our communities, the Black communities. And it's interesting because we're still having some of those conversations today. But he is also on the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And the Canadian
Canadian
Sports Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Canadian as
yes.
well. Yeah.
So welcome.
I kind of forgot about that.
Oh, don't forget about that. So welcome. I'm so happy to have you all here tonight. We're going to talk, first of all, with Jacob about why Sam Langford? How did you become introduced to the story of Sam Langford, and why? Why this story? Why did you have to tell it?
5 years ago now, I suppose it was. I was working with Shakespeare in the Sea in the summer, and was batting around the idea of writing my own show. So I talked with one of the actors who was actually in the show and who worked very closely with me on the show, dramaturging Marty Burt. And just batted their idea of writing my own show. And Marty said, well, start looking at Nova Scotian stories. And so I thought that'd be a good place to start. I looked high and low, doing research on primarily African-Canadian subjects. But I've always been a boxing fan. My family's always been a boxing family. My grandfather boxed a little bit in the Navy, so I thought I'd start there. I know we have a rich history here in Nova Scotia of boxing greats. So I started with George Dixon. Now, I read a lot about George Dixon, the shadow boxer himself. I'm a little too big to play George. George was a featherweight, so I didn't think that'd be a great place for me to start as far as portraying a character. But every time I read about George, in every single book, this other name kept coming up. Sam Langford, Sam Langford, Sam Langford. And I said, who's Sam Langford? So I found two fantastic books about Sam's life, one written by Clay Moyle, and the other written by Stephen Lafley, who is from Nova Scotia. And those books were just a huge, rich source of information, one about Sam's boxing career, and the other about Sam's life. And once I found this story, it just lent itself to a play. I mean, there's everything, I feel, everything you could want in a play in Sam's life story. He came from a family that was close. He had some friction and abuse he received from his father. So it starts in this, from this tumultuous life of this kid. And at the age of 14, he left home and basically walked to Boston. So that's how his story kind of started at 14 years old, leaving home and working in logging camps and brick factories, slowly making his way down the coast. There's shipwrecks involved. One of his first jobs was fishing in the Bay of Fundy. And on his first trip out to sea, this isn't in the play, so I love telling this story. His first trip out to sea, they capsized, they shipwrecked. And the ship was going down, and he thought he was gonna die, and luckily every shipmate made it back to shore. And he said he'd never go to sea again. Little did he know, 20 years later, he'd be traveling all over the world on steamships, going everywhere. So his life was just full of conflict, full of forgiveness, full of generosity. It's really, really shows the human spirit. And it's easy to become a fan of Sam when you read about his life and when you read the stories. I mean, I know that working with Zach and the rest of the cast, we all really developed this play together at the ship. And yeah, I mean, everybody, I think, has taken onus on Sam's story and really, really, really taken it as their own, because you just want to do the story justice. So.
And so just give us a picture. 1910, 1912,
1910, 1912, he walks down to Boston, works in an Irish bar. And he's taken in by an Irishman. So in 1910, for an Irishman to take in a little stranded boy of color, in thick Irish town Boston, even that show of generosity is an incredible thing. That man didn't have to take Sam in. So he took him in and he let him work at his bar. And because you're working at a bar, fights happen. And so Sam got in a couple tussles at 15 years old, 16 years old in this bar, beating up some local toughs. One happened to be the bare knuckle boxing champion of that area of Boston. And so this fight promoter was in there and said, how old are you, kid? Sam said, 16, still acting tough. And Mike, the bar owner, laughed himself to death, and the next day took Sam to a boxing gym. And from then on, Sam's boxing career went for, some say 270 fights, others say 400, up to 400 fights, winning 178, winning 76 of those by knockout. Like, he was a dangerous, incredible fighter. Later in his life, Sam ended up destitute. He was a very generous man. He also liked a good time. There's no question. Sam was he loved fast cars, loved suits, loved pork chops, and loved cigars. So that kind of took the bank. And he ended up blind and destitute in a small one-room boarding house in Harlem. And most of the world thought he was dead. And his story kind of died off. And it wasn't until a sports writer, Al Laney, wrote an article about the forgotten boxer, My 2 Visits with Sam, it was called, that the rest of the world kind of noticed Sam again. And I think part of that story is kind of reflective of Sam's story today. We know a lot of famous people from Nova Scotia. Not a lot of those famous people happen to be people of color. That's just the way it is right now. I couldn't understand that when I first opened this book and found this man who had these fights and went all over the world, you know, met the Queen, met all these incredible people. Why haven't I found out about him? Why didn't I know about him? Coming from the Annapolis Valley, he's from Weymouth, being a man of color. Where was his story? And so his story died off in Harlem and was revamped in the 1950s. And so I'm trying to bring a little bit of his story back to life with this play.
So Zach, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the role or roles that you play, and what you knew or didn't know about this story going into it.
I knew very little going into this show, and part of that is because I didn't even know I was going to do the show when I was in Parsboro doing Epersip, the other show that you mentioned. So I was in Parsboro doing that show, and they had already been rehearsing. I mean, you've been working on the show for 3 years.
Yeah.
Working with Marty, working with Micah. You'd already done a workshop production. And then you had already done a week of rehearsal in Parsboro. And then you guys just needed a 4th actor.
I always said we wanted another person. We wanted to get a lot of fighting on stage. I wanted this to be a very active show when I wrote it. So yeah, and you were like the perfect guy in Parsboro. So.
And I was in Parsboro, so I got cast in that show and stayed for another month and a little bit and did the show, and really glad I did. I play several different characters. I play the bare knuckle Irish, the bare knuckle boxer, who he defeats in the first scene of the play. Yeah. I play a few other fighters, McVicker, also like other various, just like Bernard Shaw turns up in the show.
Bernard Shaw.
I think there are so many other characters that I play, and also Micah, who's in the show, plays a lot of key roles and other like various roles. So yeah, it's, you know, I come on stage and punch Jacob, move his stool, and go off stage.
Like that,
and
right?
Yeah. Not to give it all away, of course, but one of the wonderful things about the show, if you do it, I do hope you all get a chance to see it, because one of the great things about the show is the rhythm of the show. It's very well orchestrated in the way that characters come in and go off, and how they change, you know, different characters, and so that in itself is quite a beautiful artistic thing to see. What was, Zach, one of the most difficult parts for you? The show is all about some very, you know, uncomfortable themes, and
definitely,
and it's very physical. So what was, you know?
Definitely the boxing physicality, learning about boxing. We all got together as a cast and started, like, first time in my life, started training and weightlifting and learning about boxing and hitting the heavy bag for the first time in my life. So I knew nothing about boxing. I'm not a very athletic person on a whole. So that was definitely a big challenge. I think the other challenge, although we had a lot of fun together in the place that you guys were staying in Parsboro, just this tiny shed full of a bunch of free weights, and we're the cast getting together every morning before rehearsal to work out. But the other challenge, I think, which I welcomed, was working with Ron, who was the director, who was always, you know, with you as well, throwing new ideas, and not really, like, knowing they needed a 4th actor, but not quite knowing what they needed that 4th actor to do. So every day it was a new a new something.
Developing.
It was
Something new.
something
It was
new, something
something
you had
new.
written the night before, like right into like week 4 of rehearsal. It was constantly evolving.
And a lot of the rhythm that you talked about, that Juanita spoke about, was the genius of Ron Jenkins. He was an incredible director, incredible guy to work with. He had done a lot of shows that were physical and were based on athletics. He did a show about was it Rocket Bouchard? I can't. Ron's going to kill me for not remembering. But Ron he works with athletics. He's an athlete himself, very gifted athlete. So when he came in, like that rhythm, we were on the same page there from the start, and he really, really pushed us all to keep the pace up of the show and to keep the show alive. And me as a writer, he would send me home constantly being like, this scene is good, but it needs more, when I thought, it was done, and really, really pushed for this crisp, nice, rhythmic show. It's almost like a dance. It almost turned into a dance.
And I remember commenting to Jacob after the show, I was so impressed with how physical the show was that I went home and I found my skipping rope. Now, I didn't get the same results that he did at all, but I'm telling you, it really sort of motivates you in many different ways. Ricky, as a boxer, who's been through, both ends, right? So when you hear this story, were you familiar with the story of Sam Langford?
Oh, no question. Yeah, no
so
question.
tell me about your vision of Sam Langford.
Well, my vision of Sam Langford is the vision of Mike Tyson. He's identical to Mike Tyson in this era. And a fabulous fighter, amazing fighter, an astonishing puncher. He had it all. And nobody would fight him. And people would back down. Hey, no, sorry, I don't want to fight you, man. Jack Dempsey, one of the famous world champions, said, "Hey, look, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight Sam Langford. That's the only guy I don't want to fight. Anybody else, I'm not afraid of, or I have no fear of them, but not Sam Langford. I have fear of him." Yeah, so he's an amazing fighter.
What are some of the similar themes that you might be hearing, that you might have experienced, Ricky, too, just in terms of living that boxing life, that boxer's life?
Some of the same things.
Yeah.
Well, the shouting from the audience and the crowd and the people, that is a motivator. That is an extreme motivator when people are saying, "Go get him, Ricky, go get him," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm ready to go get him." And it's an extreme motivator to have that kind of support, and not only that, not only the support in the arena, the support on the outside. You'll have the support on the outside. "Hey, champ, go get him, champ." You're going to the gym or walking to the gym or whatever. You still have that support. "Go get him, champ, go get him." And it was a wonderful, wonderful theme in my life. Yeah.
I remember my grandfather telling me a story once that around 1912, 1914, that Sam was fighting a fight. And in those days, there was only maybe one radio in your community. And all the guys went to his uncle's house to listen to the fight on the radio. Sam was fighting in New York. And it was broadcast via St. John, New Brunswick, or something like that. So it comes across the water, so all the family in Weymouth are sitting at this one country house on the floor listening to the fights. And what a moment, just to hear your last name, amplify, over the radio. And for those of you who don't know, the Sam Langford House still exists today. It exists in Weymouth Falls. It's now a private residence, and people actually live in it. It's a little 3-bedroom house, or a 3-room house, I should say. I want to talk a little bit about how you were able to put yourself in Sam Langford's shoes, Jacob. Tell me a little bit about the process of getting yourself prepared to be in those shoes.
It started, I had to start from a physical sense because he was so physical. And if you watch his footage online, which you can find lots of footage of Sam fighting on YouTube. He was a physical phenom, just like Mike Tyson.
Yes.
So I started there. I figured that was the easiest route for me to access, and so I started training. And I have an athletic background in football and basketball and a bunch of other sports. But as soon as I started picking up boxing, there's nothing like it. There's no sport like it. There's so much to think about. And I'm training right now in a gym in Bedford. And, you know, as I'm in the ring sparring, taking punches to the head, my trainer's saying, turn your back foot. You got to think about moving. Got to think about moving. Like, I can't think about anything. I'm getting hit in the face every 3 seconds. So I started there and really learned that there's so much to this fight game. And I felt like a kid starting, because I'm working with more experienced fighters, and they're making me feel like I'm, you know, just a young kid starting out. From there, I just really tried to realize some of the struggles that Sam would have gone through that I haven't actually gone through. I mean, I'm from the Annapolis Valley. I had a great upbringing. I had lots of great friends. It's a very friendly place. So as far as the racial tension that Sam felt, I mean, there were some things in my life, of course, naturally. But the racial tension that Sam felt, like we were talking about motivators, and Ricky saying, go champ, go get him. That's not what Sam was facing. Sam was facing the opposite. Sam was facing, go kill him. Go kill him. And they meant Sam. They wanted Sam to be destroyed in the ring. They wanted nothing to do with Sam. And the way Sam fought, you know, he was such a dangerous puncher, he could knock some guys out in 2 rounds. But if he did that, the crowd would want his head. So what he would do is he would evade. They were some of the first fighters, Jack Johnson and Sam Langford and George Dixon, correct me if I'm wrong,
yes.
but they were some of the first fighters to really start that evasive
yes.
footwork and evasive head movements. But then they would call them yellow. Oh, black fighters, they got a yellow stripe down the middle. They're scared. So he couldn't knock them out, because then they're strong like gorillas, they would say. But he couldn't run, because then they have a yellow streak. So that world, being, you know, encapsulated in that world and being a high regarded figure and looked up to by both people of color and not, but also being looked down upon by most of society in Canada and America, I just really tried to, as best I could, put myself in that hot seat and imagine. Sometimes when I was writing, I would put headphones in of just an angry crowd and just write some of the fight scenes of what Sam was hearing, racial slurs and kill him, get rid of him. And that's what kind of motivated me through a lot of the scenes, and just really motivated me to capture Sam's story as best I could and do it justice, because the struggles he went through, he had a great life, don't get me wrong, but the struggles he went through were real. Like him and Joe, his trainer Joe, again, Polish descendant, white guy, they became brothers almost. But they had to get out of town. They'd finish a fight, Sam would knock a guy out, and there's actually footage on YouTube of Sam knocking a guy out, and then 4 big muscle heads get in the ring and immediately circles Joe and Sam. And they were his sparring partners, but they were also his security detail. What they would do is Sam would knock a guy out, they'd jump in the ring, they'd grab the bag of money, and they were on the next train out of town. Because if they stayed, you know, who knows what could have happened. So just Sam being in that world, I just tried my best to envision myself in those kind of tumultuous situations.
And I look at, Ricky, for you, coming up quite a bit later, the opportunities. So we talk about how tough things were for Sam, and of course with no education,
yes.
it makes things that much more difficult. But you were able to have both.
Oh, no question. No question. I after I got out of high school, my mom, God rest her soul, she would say to me, she used to call me, when I was 5 years old, she would call me Manny, as a man, I guess. Hey, Manny, your aunt and uncle were over today. Did you get any money? Yes, Ma. How much? 75 cents. Give me a quarter. I said, what for, Ma? For your university education. I said, Ma, what's university? I'll tell you someday. I'll tell you someday. Guess what? It's stuck in my head forever. It never went away. I went to university. I was successful. I got a degree in sociology, and I worked at Addiction Services. And she planted that seed in me, like, you know, and I went on from there, and wow, you know, so it was a different era. There's no question. It was a different era, and I had a lot of success, not only with my mom and my family, but with other people. Yes. Other people, and folks who would reach out to help me, to do whatever. Hey, Rick, you need a job, or Rick, you need something. Can we help you? It was amazing. It was amazing.
Is that common?
I was going to say, and good on your mom too, because it is one of those things that I hear women, especially that were born in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, say that they were always in fear that their kids would be good in sports. It was a fear that your kids would be good in sports, black children, because if they were good in sports, they would not be encouraged to elevate in their curriculum. And so often parents would say, you know, no, he can't run, and they could run. No, he can't play ball, and they could play ball. So good on your mom for respecting the fact that you were a great boxer and appreciating that, but also continuing to encourage you to take it.
Oh, no question.
Further.
I mean, back in the day, like, you know, my mom, back in her years, I would say back in 1922, that's when she grew up. She made it to grade 11. And my grandmother, hey, that's enough, Helen. You gotta go work. We don't have enough money to keep us going. You need to go and work, and that kind of stuff. So my mom knew that education was very important, and actually she worked at King's College, and I knew she was brilliant. I always called her brilliant. But when you have young people who want to be around you, and she was a little older than them, when you have young people who want to hang around with you, that means something. You know, they would come to our home, and so on. Young students would come to our home from King's College, and wow, this is amazing. You know, very nice people, and so my mom had a connection. Yeah.
You talked about the help that you would get from people in the community, or you know, I'm going to ask this question to Ricky, because that was a common theme in Sam's life. Either his generosity in helping other fighters out. Part of the reason they say Sam was destitute at the end was because he gave over half his fortune away to fighters that he fought who were down and out. And I've always thought that was a common theme, but of course I've never been in the fight game. Is that something that you find as a boxer in the boxing community, that you guys do? There's a camaraderie there? You guys do help each other out?
I don't know if it's a camaraderie, but I think it's more has to do with how you engage people and how they engage you. And I had a very friendly engagement with a lot of my fans and a lot of people, and you know, my name as a boxer was the gentleman Ricky Anderson. Right. So like I had a gentlemanly attitude, and people would respond to that, and they would help me, or Ricky, can I do anything for you? What can I do? You know, it was amazing, just amazing, like life.
Well, maybe that's what it was about Sam, because he was generous and he was kind. I mean, Sam, the footage that we had up earlier, he's always got this big smile on his face. And when you watch some of the footage on YouTube, he's still, in the middle of a fight, he's got a smile on his face. And you know there's things being yelled at him, or the fighter across from him saying something, but he was always grinning, which would have been infuriating for the guy across from you, I'm sure.
Yeah. And even prior to Muhammad Ali, Sam Langford had a great sense of humor and a very kind of quirky voice, right? If you've ever heard his voice, it's that kind of squeaky little, you know, which made him even more comical for a tough guy.
Yeah.
So I want to ask the cast, why do people need to go see this show? What is so great about this show?
I mean, one of the things that's so exciting to me is this story. The story, like you said, that I just knew so little about. Only hearing snippets from you before and learning through getting into the rehearsal and being thrown all this information. It's like being handed the scene where he's met these famous people, and is really like.
Yeah.
How have I never heard of Sam Langford? It's amazing. The story, it's incredible. So there's that, and also I think that, like you said, the rhythm of the show, the tempo, the lighting design. Leanne Vardy is our lighting designer. Yeah. Amazing work. Our sound designer, Joe McAuliffe. I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, but that amazing sound design. Like the whole team of this show, and Marty, who helped with the dramaturgy of the show, and from the get-go of this show, and Micah, who was also very early on, I think, involved in the show, from what I know. So there's so much love for this show that so many people have poured into it, and I think that it shows.
One of the things I'm most grateful for when we were putting this show together is the onus it seemed everybody took of Sam's story. Like, we all wanted to do it justice. Once they knew more, I mean, I remember the production team, we sat down, they did a reading, and then 3 days later, there was team members coming back being like, I've read the book, cover to cover. And it's a pretty dense book. I've read about his life, cover to cover. It's incredible. Why don't people know? Some of the famous people that Zach is talking about are people like Picasso, people like George Bernard Shaw. Sam rubbed elbows with these people, these icons. And yeah, it's the why. It's the why. If you don't know who Sam Langford is, that's why I would say find out, whether it's here, whether it's at the library. There's 2 lovely books here at the library. Find out, because the heartbeat, I keep bringing it up, but the generosity that Sam experienced, that he bestowed in a time when riots were happening and towns were being destroyed based on race, at a time when domestic violence in the household, which this play does touch on, was common, and it just a really, the world, as it seems, was a tinderbox ready to go up, but yet these people were mostly poor people too. These people didn't have much. Joe didn't really have much to give Sam. He ran a pharmacy, he ran a boxing gym, but by no means was Joe Woodman, his best friend and trainer and manager, rich. But Joe gave. By no means was Sam. I mean, Sam became rich, but ended up, again, poor, and was never a bitter man about it. There's stories like that from Sam, from Joe Woodman, from Martha Langford, his wife, where we can talk about forgiveness, because there was some friction in the Langford household. Just forgiveness. All of that is encapsulated in this man's story, and that's why I would encourage people to find out.
And Ricky, on a final note, I just want to say, Nova Scotia has produced many, like yourself, boxing greats. Why do you think that is?
I think it's the food. I think it's the food. I don't know. We eat some good grades here. We got some good guys. I don't know. I just think it's. I'm not too certain, but I think it's when somebody catches on. Like if somebody, oh wow, geez, he's a good boxer, right? And then that person engages the other person and says, hey, well, why can't I help you? And that person becomes good, and then it's just a back and forth, another person becoming good as a result of so-and-so, as a result of another great champion. Wow, boom, boom, boom. I had a lot of support. I had a lot of great coaches. One of the things in boxing, and not a lot of people understand this, but here's the thing about boxing. When you have a coach or a trainer, the coach or trainer if you're going to be successful, has to be able to tell you how to beat that fighter. Guess what? Not a lot of coaches or trainers can do that. It's very seldom that you see a guy that can go, hey, here's what you do. When he throws that, you throw this. Not a lot of people can do that. A lot of people, a lot of coaches are very athletic and want you to, train and all that kind of stuff. But they're not able to tell you how to defeat that specific fighter.
Right.
And that's a challenge. And if there was more of that, we would have some even more famous and successful fighters in Nova Scotia.
Wow. I'd like to open it up to the audience. If there's anybody in the audience that has any questions, just raise your hand. Right there.
Don't be shy.
Great.
Hey guys, great panel so far. Jacob, I just wanted to ask you what kind of goals you had when you were writing the story and how have they changed now that you've produced it?
When I first started writing this story, my goal, it was a one-person show. It was a one-man show when I first started writing this. And so my goal was just to get it up on some wood boards, either in my living room in front of my family or for whoever, just to get it up. And just from a, selfish standpoint, I just wanted to play the character. And then I read more about his life, and the one-man show kind of got too big for his britches, as it were. Like the story was too big, and so again, Marty was a huge encouragement. Well, more characters. That's what it is. Natasha from Ship's Company. More characters come here. We did a whole workshop for a week at the ship, living at Natasha's, just writing, a big writing workshop, me and Marty. And at that point, the goal was, let's get this thing up in front of a big audience. Let's get this thing rolling. And we did a workshop at the waiting room. And from that point, who knows? Like, the goal became then to just do Sam's story justice, whatever that meant, and to get it out to as many people as we could. And thankfully, Natasha and Jeremy took the risk to produce the show, and because it is my first, and I'm very grateful forever to them for doing that. And the goal now is to see where it takes us, spread it as much as we can.
Anybody else? Don't be shy.
Hi, I'm just wondering if you can talk about the kinds of research that you did. I mean, Jacob, you've already talked a lot about that, but I'm also wondering, Zach, what kinds of research do you do to prepare to perform a historical character?
That's a really good question. A lot of the preparation for me for this show, because I had a 3-week period to get this up for the first time, was just in the room. What is Ron and Jacob and Marty throwing at me? Like, oh, this is what the show's about. You're playing this fighter, you're playing this fighter, you're playing this fighter, and also playing a lot of miscellaneous characters who are sort of like mishmash of different people or aren't even really people. So a lot of it for me was just being thrown, okay, this guy is a big, mean British fighter. Okay. 3 weeks, go. So one of the things that I'm excited about in revisiting the show is that I've had the time to do a little bit more research and do a little bit of the reading that exists about his life, because there isn't, there aren't volumes and volumes and volumes. There's YouTube videos, and also getting to know a little bit about other fighters that Sam would have fought, other fighters that would have been inspired by Sam. So yeah, it's an exciting place to be now, where I can come at this show from a new perspective, right, and learn and knowing a little bit more about these people.
And I'm always curious too, when somebody's in shoes like Zach, and you have to play characters who are very mean, and you have to play characters who will say things and have to say things that you would never say in life, how that feels to have to pull those words out of your body.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great things is there are a few moments in the play where I am that person. I play that role in the show, and it's an exciting thing to hear the audience react to that.
Yeah.
Because they're engaged. They're engaged and hearing the kinds of things that Sam faced and seeing that on stage, and it just becomes we're just shocked and hopefully like crawling forward a little bit.
Yeah, and often I can remember, actors saying, or being very expressive about not wanting to say certain words, and I would say, well, pretend you're saying it to me like you're telling me something that's really important, or it's a favor, you're doing me a favor, and it sort of changed the context in your mind so that it rolls off like you're saying, would you like a potato? And it has to come out that way. Is there anybody else? So for those of you who have not seen the show, you must see the show. It is April 20th to 30th at Eastern Front Theatre. It is called Chasing Champions, starring Jacob Sampson, Micah Cromwell, Zach, Faye, and Marty Burt. And please do go out. Be prepared to have a fabulous time. It's a very energetic show, so you'll need a rest afterwards. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.